Hi, welcome to Starfinder Wednesday. I'm developer Jason Keeley, and with me here is Jason Tondro.
That's right. Hey, everybody.
How you doing?
It's good. It's been a good day.
It's been a good day. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So you've tuned in to listen to us talk about mysteries and conspiracies for a little bit, and how you might run those in your game, and how you might want to play in them. If you find
we want to make this kind of a workshop where we talk about advice on how to run these games, how to play them, common problems and stumbling blocks, common challenges, so that this doesn't just apply to the upcoming adventure.
That's true.
That we're doing, but that applies to any game you might play or run in on your own.
Just and obviously for Starfinder. Hey, and just get the plug out of the way too, because essentially, the Threefold Conspiracy Volume 1, the Chimera Mystery, written by myself, has an article right after it that does talk generally about running mysteries. It does kind of focus a little bit more on the locked door murder mystery kind of mystery, but it explains how mysteries can be anything from finding a mole inside of an organization or hunting down an elusive hacker or something like that. It's essentially describes a mystery as a challenge that can't be solved with a single die roll. And that isn't combat, right?
Right. And there can be a lot of combat in it.
Yes.
We were talking about this a little bit before the stream. You've got the combat at the end, because in a regular sort of Sherlock Holmes murder mystery, you just sort of gather everybody in the parlor and the detective reveals the killer and Inspector Lestrade carries them off to Scotland Yard and it's over. But because it's a Starfinder, instead that person runs and you got to catch him with a gun, right? You have
transforms into a terrible monster, terrible alien monster. Rips his face off. It was me, all goo everywhere.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk about just sort of the general principles of what makes a mystery. We're going to talk a little bit about how conspiracies and conspiracy theories are sort of subset of mysteries that you can engage with, especially in Starfinder.
Yeah.
If you tuned in last week, Rob and I talked about the unseen a lot, so this will dovetail a little bit nicely with that discussion. And from there, we'll just sort of have some fun stories that we tell us, some of our favorites here and there. And at any point, if you have any questions, bang it into the chat, and we'll see what we can do if we spot them. So let's talk about. I want to just sort of get real basic, and talk generally about. If we're talking about mysteries, specifically, murder mysteries and crime mysteries, right? Not just someone doing something wrong, more or less, than someone doing something shady.
And investigation is an aspect of almost every Starfinder adventure. Like there's an investigation phase, often where the players are trying to find out what the problem is, or where the bad guy is, or what's really going on here. So there's a mystery element in almost everything we publish.
That's true. But for like, you're just sort of like, when you think mystery, when you think solving a crime, you have to know, and this is sort of when you're creating it as a GM and when you're trying to figure this out as a player, you want to think about the three pillars of mystery, which are motive, means, and opportunity. I'm sure you've probably heard those words a bunch of times if you've read any kind of like Agatha Christie novel or watched almost any kind of murder show.
So walk us through those three things.
Sure, motive, means, and opportunity. Let's start with means first. Means is sort of like, so you've got your suspects, right? So as you're narrowing them down, does the suspect have the means to commit the crime, or whatever the
if it's a murder?
If it's a murder, do they have access to the weapon that caused the murder, for instance? Could they even wield that weapon if it was too big or too small or whatever? Do they have the technical know-how to hack into the computer to turn off the security cameras at the time, or do they know someone who could do that for them? So all of this sort of falls under the umbrella of, do they have the means to do it? Motive is, of course, motive. Does the killer or what have you have a reason to commit the crime?
And a lot of that's, I think, in many ways often becomes the bulk of the investigation. Is where you're trying to interview, and this can often really bog down. This is a potential roadblock to a campaign, to an adventure, if the players feel like they have to interview every single suspect and find out what their potential motive is. And it's often very repetitive because they're asking the same questions of a lot of people. But think about how we see this on Law and Order or every other cop show. Like
Right.
you don't see the entire questioning, you don't see the entire interrogation, or when you see the Avengers all get interrogated, and the latest. It's the questions are posed, but it's a different character answering the question every time.
Indeed.
And you can just skip through a lot of that very quickly.
I think actually this reminds me of something that you wrote actually coming up in a upcoming volume. There's a part where the PCs get interrogated.
Yes.
And you wrote to just throw them off in a situation, sort of like cut back and forth between and ask a question of one PC, but have another PC answer it as if there were sort of this montage of scenes as they're being interrogated. And that's sort of a great visual way to sort of break this sort of thing up. And finding out a motive doesn't necessarily have to deal with questioning.
You're right.
You could be like finding their notes on the data pad, or just sort of watching them argue with someone else, say something out loud as they say, I always hated that guy.
It can be a great opportunity for the operatives and the other your mechanic with a spy drone to gather information from NPCs that don't know they're being observed.
And every crime should have a motive, and it's the biggest thing. Whereas you could maybe possibly buy off someone who has the means to help you out, or fake an opportunity, by changing the supposed time of the crime.
Yep.
But motive is always the thing, and the motive may not be as transparent as emotion or money, right? But every crime should have a motive. There's in real life, there's almost no motiveless crimes, right?
And the motive might not necessarily be one that relates to the victim at all. It might be purely internal on the part of the killer. Like I did this crime because I'm a serial killer or whatever, and it's triggering my psychoses.
Right. Yeah.
And there's not actually any connection to the victim. It's just all purely in the head. But that's still a motive.
But that still counts as a motive, right? And then finally we have opportunity, which means was the suspect at the time, at the place where the crime happened, at the time the crime happened, right?
And this is where the killer normally defends themselves the most.
Yeah.
You can't defend yourself very often from a motive. People can find out your motive.
Yes.
But you're like, yes, I wanted him dead.
Right.
But I couldn't have done it.
I was nowhere near the
I was nowhere near the crime. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And that's this is where the most obfuscation comes from. Whereas it looked like the crime happened at, midnight or whatever, but it actually happened 2 hours before. But at midnight, your main suspect is clearly, in the middle of a crowded room full of other people. I was like, I couldn't have done it. All these people saw me. I was on the infosphere, streaming this game or whatever.
They hide the weapon. They admit the motive, but they lie about the opportunity.
Yeah, indeed. So those are the sort of the big three. So when you're creating a mystery for your players to solve, or when you're in the process of solving the mystery, you want to think about those big pillars
and give them to your PCs. Often players don't know how to pursue an investigation. They just what do? We start wandering around asking people questions and looking at places. That's not a bad place to start. But if you don't have anybody in the group who's got an experienced detective kind of character going along, just remind them, okay, look for means, motive, and opportunity. You can do that with an NPC. There's a million ways you can just sort of plant those seeds. And that will give the players a checklist that they can start working through.
Indeed. That's one of the things wanted to buy into as a player, and you realize that you're in a mystery, right? Your character realizes, oh no, there's a dead body. We're the only people on board this starship.
Right.
It has to be one of us. It's obviously not one of the PCs.
And it's obviously in a lot of our adventures, the PCs become suspects.
Or that
it's a motivation, right? Like, well, you have to find the killer. Why should we have to find the killer? Isn't there cops for that? Well, but you're charged with the crime, or you're a suspect for the crime, so now you have to clear your name.
Or you're locked in a remote location with the killer, so it becomes a survival self-preservation situation.
Totally.
Other ways the PCs might get involved is just simply a patron of some kind is like, I don't want to be confused. A friend of that's the Murder She Wrote route, right?
Yes.
Jessica Fletcher goes to investigate this crime because her friend is being accused of the crime, right? So you just find someone who's like, an NPC who's real friendly with the PCs and says, I didn't know you know me. I didn't do it, but everyone thinks I did. I need you to figure out and help it out.
If you have a recurring NPC who you can make the sympathetic suspect, right, then that's gold. But if you don't have one, you may. And if, in this adventure, we start the players off at first level, right, and they're starting off. So there are no recurring NPCs. They haven't met anybody yet.
Yeah, indeed.
But we can give them a connection. We can say, okay, like you went to school with this person, or your old Vietnam War buddies. That's the Magnum PI.
That's the Magnum PI. Yeah, exactly. And from there, so you're a PC, you're playing in one of these games, and you realize you're in a mystery. Someone has asked you to solve a mystery. Someone's accused you of doing something.
Yes.
You're in a position where you have little to no choice but to solve this mystery.
Right. Little to no choice.
Because it's an adventure, right?
Yeah.
And you want to. I mean, it's another thing. I mean, that's always the thing when we talk about certain subgenres of any RPG is the buy-in.
Yes.
Right. You've talked. The GMs and players should be starting off with talking to one another.
That's right.
If there is a overarching thing that when you're making characters or when you're about to start a campaign, hey, this campaign's going to have some horror in it. Is everyone cool with that? Hey, we're going to do the mystery here, so everyone can feel free to build at least one investigative-y kind of character, right? Make sure that your character has motives, and while you're building your character, maybe you want to make that tough, rough soldier. That's when the GM can come in. Hey, do you mind if I take your add this little bit to your backstory so that your PC is able to become invested in the adventure. I mean, that's just sort of general GM advice. Right?
Have a session 0, folks. Cannot underestimate the value of a session 0.
From there, when you're a PC, you want to start taking notes. I think.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably want to take notes when you're playing in any game, just so you keep things straight. Because we play, and then we take a couple weeks off, and then we play again. But with a mystery, you really need those notes more than anything.
And so I'm coming from a professorial background here. So I want to acknowledge that everybody uses notes differently.
Yeah.
Some people, they want to meticulously record everything that happens. Other people just need to write down names. Like that's me. Like I cannot remember names for hell, so I have to write them all down, right? Yeah. Other times, you may not even go back and consult the notes, but the very act of writing the notes is what helps you remember them, right? So you don't even go back and even really need to look them up. Yeah. But they're incredibly useful to have, especially when you only meet once a week or once a month or something like that. We
already have a few questions here in chat. Lava Being and Lori 7x3. And some questions. We will let's get. I'm gonna get a little further in, but I want to definitely want to note that we've read them and I've got them in here. And we'll. I don't need to take notes, as I just said. You should take notes.
It's a steel trap up here, folks.
It is a rusty steel trap. I got a mind like a rusty sieve. And so we'll get back to you because one of the Laurie's question is pretty good. And to Lava Being's question, I'm actually not really sure. I didn't realize that the Chimera mystery was listed as repeatable for OP, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
So yeah, I guess probably Thirsty probably went in there and tinkered with some ways to change them. But we'll get into sort of GM advice in that vein in a minute. Also, I like to both for GMs and players, when you're making a mystery and when you're maybe just trying to solve one, I like to do what's called making a relationship map. And I realized I should have brought my notebook with me, which has the relationship map for this adventure.
I remember these from Vampire the Masquerade. Was the first time I saw relationship maps.
And basically all that is all that can be is just a bunch of names. I often put them in circles, and then lines that connect the circles with lists which note relationships between these characters.
I drew one for Arthurian literature whenever I taught it.
Like there you go.
All the characters in the King Arthur Royal Court, like how they're all related to each other and friends and rivals and all that stuff. It's something we keep track.
It becomes helpful to keep track of the names, right, first of all, and then you're able to sort of make this web of lines, so you know that this person's brother, but was married to this other person.
That's a good idea.
And now has as a business partner over here, and that will help you sort of untangle a little bit of the motives and possibly means an opportunity. And that's a great place to put notes of like, was not at scene of crime at 11 p.m. or something like that.
Because the great danger of a mystery is the GM oversaturating the players with clues, with names. And the thing is that the players don't know what's a clue and what isn't. Like all they know is you're giving me tons of data. Yeah. Names, places, people you used to work with, old relationships, potential motives. And they don't, it's hard just to keep track of everything.
Right.
And the players are wandering around surrounded by clues like a cloud of bats, right? And so, that's a good idea. A relationship map helps you pin down things so you don't have to remember them.
So you're not just writing a list of things. You just kind of, you have a visual aid in a way. And I imagine that in a conspiracy, right, that web gets even more tangled, right?
Well, that becomes the conspiracy the conspiracy wall, yes. But I'm thinking off the old Illuminati conspiracy, right? Where you have showing which organizations and individuals are controlled by whom,
right? Yeah,
secretly, whether they know it or not,
right?
But so that becomes organizations rather than individuals.
So it works. It works on all sort of
Yes,
a bunch
macro
of
micro
levels.
scale.
Macro micro scale, exactly. Another thing you just want to like, especially for a murder type mystery, is looking everywhere. It sounds weird, just like search everything as thoroughly as possible. As you said, murderers hide weapons and other sort of incriminating evidence gets tucked away or happens to fall behind a sofa or something like that. So if you think that a place is important, search it up. Search it to the nines. Take that 20.
One of the challenges of doing a murder in a science fiction setting is that there might be some disconnect between what the players know about the technology and what the GM knows about the technology. And so if someone thinks, well, I want to, they may not think to search the garbage bin because they don't know that there are garbage bins on a starship, right? And so you might have to provide a little breadcrumb to get them to remember that. Like, so, okay, you toss your the remains from your dinner down the garbage chute. And so like, wait, there's a garbage chute? Have we checked the garbage chute?
I've checked the garbage
right?
chute.
So that might be necessary.
Indeed. And I think one of the final ones we put as sort of a player note is to trust no one, which comes in definitely handy for conspiracy type games, right? But even don't take anyone's alibi at face value.
Yeah.
I guess for lack of a better word, it might be a better phrase to trust but verify. An old adage that we used to have. We have said a lot in editing. I don't know if when you came in, they were saying a lot like, make sure the developer knew what they were doing, but double check anyway.
Just
they spelled that right.
The trust no one cliche has become such a cliche that it's often a surprise if you meet someone you can trust.
Right.
If someone actually tells you, oh yeah, I totally wanted to kill that dude, right? That's actually kind of a surprise because everyone's too busy hiding all these things. Also, but then the other way to take that is to have a character lie to conceal their motives, but to be concealing something that's not actually their motive for killing them.
Right. Or not, they're not the killer, and this is a motive, they're hiding something else, and then you finding out that they're having a secret affair.
Yes, exactly.
Is actually the alibi.
Right.
Yeah. So that's another way to sort of why you want to question people. To a good degree. Now, Laurie's asking, what to do if paranoia takes over? Obviously, you don't want to have, you don't want to be so paranoid. You don't trust anybody completely, and you're just throwing out baseless accusations left and right because that's going to just sort of cut off your access from asking the suspects more stuff, right? You need to temper that paranoia with judicious questioning.
I usually find it useful when if the PCs get off on a tangent, and often the paranoia is an example of this tangent. They'll be like, well, we don't they're all suspects. I don't trust anybody. And they have somebody knock down the door with a gun, right? We're going back to Dashiell Hammett's good old.
They don't have it.
And I want to note that when Dashiell Hammett said that quote, he was giving it as a bad example of pulp literature. He's actually not telling you to do that. If you read the quote in context, he's actually saying these writers these days, they're all terrible. Every time their plot stalls, somebody knocks down the door with a gun. But in our gaming, sometimes it can be very useful.
It's useful, yeah.
Especially if your players have a bunch of combat abilities they haven't been able to use this session because they've been making a lot of sense, motive, and perception checks.
Right, yeah.
Give that soldier somebody to bash.
Yeah. It becomes, we're sort of drifting into the GM advice here. So let's just get into that because that becomes an important, the biggest tenet for when you're running, almost when you're running any adventure, but especially when you're running mysteries, is to stay flexible about things, right? So you're a GM and you've created your locked door murder mystery. You know who did it. You know how and why and how it happened, and it's so intricately plotted that it basically is almost a clockwork of murder. That's great. You've written a great story there for sure. But what you're about to do is play a game. So you want to make sure that you can't don't be so locked into the A, B, and C, right? That you're gonna end up being. There's only the one clue that the players need to find, and that'll break it wide open.
In many ways, you're placing a good game, a fun experience for everybody behind a locked door, and not letting the players have the key.
Right. We're saying, you'll get the key if you ask me the exact right question with the exact wording. So you want to be really, really careful about that. Improv is always a good tool in a GM's box, but in such a way, just to figure out hey, look. So there's lots of ways that this can happen. You can go so far as to basically make sure that the PCs find the clues that they need to find, and that is they get moved, right? So if the PCs are really intent on searching that trash chute, and have been are stalling everywhere else,
Yes.
put the clue in the trash chute, and then as they're figuring it out amongst themselves, you figure out how that clue got in there, so
Yeah.
you can back up the fact that the murderer just chucked the murder weapon down in the trash.
Originally, you had the murder weapon thrown out the airlock, but
Right.
they're not checking the outside of the ship.
Exactly.
So put it in the garbage.
Put it
chute.
in the garbage chute.
And the other version of this is the gumshoe approach, right? Which we should probably at least mention. And we'll talk about a lot of other games during this stream because you should read all the games. Like, right?
Yes,
like
pretty much.
Other games and other books and film and literature, all these things really inform what we do here at Starfinder. But yeah, so we're talking about the Gumshoe engine. It's a RPG system designed by Robin Laws.
I can't remember who designed the original one, or this Ken Hite and Robin Laws. I think were the originals.
Anyway, but Gumshoe skips over the whole perception check,
right.
And just says if there is you guys are all trained investigators, you're all detectives.
Right.
So if you enter a room where there is a clue, you automatically find the clue. Now you may not know what it means. You may have to make some skill checks to interpret it or to the degree to which you know about it.
Right.
But you never don't find the clue. It's just assumed. And other games have done this as well. But what we're arguing, what we're suggesting here is a different technique.
Right.
Where if they don't find the clue, first, make sure that there's multiple clues that give the evidence that you need.
This goes back to one of, I think, Laurie's question earlier was like, how many clues is a good breadcrumb trail for the PCs, and not how many is too much. You want to essentially have several avenues of, if you have a piece of information you want the PCs to have, you want to have at least 3 avenues in which they can find that way out. Is this a diplomacy? They asking around about this person, get that diplomacy check. Are they spying on the person to see them do the thing in action, or are they just searching the infosphere, hacking the computer to find stuff in their past that they tried to cover up? Those are basically all lead to the same clue, but they're different avenues. Now, there's a matter of like, how many clues do you need to give to say. That is depending on your mystery. It can be, a bunch or very little.
But you need to be able to prove means, motive, and opportunity.
Right, yeah.
So if you need one clue for each of those 3 things,
that could be a way to do it.
A way.
A way. Like it all depends on the nature of your clue.
Yes,
so if your clue
exactly.
is a tape of someone committing the murder and the time and screaming the motive
all
at
they
them,
need is
that's
one
only
clue.
the one clue. But then that becomes less of a...
That's a 1-hour adventure, folks.
Exactly. It becomes less of a mystery and more of a treasure hunt. Or and that person ends up getting away.
Yeah, the fugitive.
And then, but always, as always, those things could also be wrong, right? You could have...
That's true.
Red herrings are sort of an important part of mysteries, but you should try not to inundate your players with them, because they may get focused on a specific thing and draw the wrong conclusions. And you're as the GM, you're seeing the conclusions the PCs are drawing because they're talking to each other generally, and you can help them nudge one way or the other. And there's multiple ways to go about doing this.
Yeah, good.
Here's some specifics, right? We were sort of talking about this earlier. If the PCs are very fixated on a particular NPC as the suspect, and that NPC doesn't happen to be anyone super important to the players, have them turn up dead next.
Yeah,
because there's no way they could have killed the first person if they get killed by the killer. That is a great way to sort of like help refresh the investigation.
Yes. If they've become focused on the wrong suspect.
Right, yeah.
Kill the suspect.
Kill the suspect. Another way to do that, another way you can do is to help get things back on track is, just have evidence fall into the PC's lap too, right? And then just figure out how it got there. I sort of said earlier, someone, a dog comes trotting up, found in the bushes, a severed hand in the bushes. Oh no, that's that's the severed hand that's been missing that we've been looking for, and has all the juicy DNA on it.
The closer it is to the end of your play session, the more forgiving the players will be, right? Because they all want a rewarding session too. So if it gets late, they're like, oh, okay.
Yes. I'm just going to jump in here. Laurie's saying it's always finding it difficult to make players take the one item or clue they need, even when they don't get how to solve that. Besides, you have strangers to take that item. Yeah. They're going to take what they take. I think you can't just necessarily. You need to if you describe something as a GM, the PCs will generally realize that is a spotlight.
Yes.
On the item, right? As you notice that there is a clear blood stain on the whatever
Yeah.
on that particular piece of furniture, they'll probably hone in on that. If we're looking about stuff that's going to piece together with other things later on, and they don't pick that up, that comes into the range of being flexible. You need to figure out what other pieces of that puzzle that the PCs need to get to the image you want them to get to.
Players are usually hypersensitive to things that the GM spends a lot of time describing. Even to the point where they'll become paranoid about it. So you'll say, okay, it's raining. And they're like, wait a minute, it's raining? Why is it raining?
Yeah.
Like there must be some mysterious reason why it's raining. And no, it's just raining.
It's just raining.
So that might be your situation where the players are sort of oversaturated and they're worried, they're focusing on everything. But try to avoid telling them like, okay, you take that thing. Because players don't like it when they get told what their characters do, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Or even what their characters feel.
Yeah.
But if an NPC finds it interesting, maybe the players will find it. So instead of telling the player, okay, well, you have this strange urge to pick up that letter opener. Instead, an NPC says, a letter opener, and like picks it up and starts. This looks just about the same size as the injury on Mr. Caldwell's neck. Yeah. And then that way you can convey the idea what you're trying to get at.
Right, yeah. But you know, that's your sort of parachute that you can, the ripcord you can pull later on. And that's when you're seeing that your players might be stalling. You don't want to necessarily throw that right away.
Correct.
But it's a great tool to use later on in the session or adventure. The third and final, the most drastic way you can sort of like change things up and be flexible is to change your mystery altogether. The PCs are focused on a particular suspect. They said, "Oh, he's got this motive. They seem to have proved these means and opportunity. They've got all this clues, and that was not the person you thought."
No, they've completely misinterpreted the clues that you placed.
However, if you can do it, change the culprit.
Just let the players be right.
Now, don't tell them that you're going to do that all the time, because you're not going to do it all the time.
And never tell them that you did it
later on,
because it will take all of the victory out, and you'll just look like a sham. Never let them look behind the curtain and see the wizard. Right?
Of course, we're all saying there's a wizard, there's a man behind all these curtains. Everybody, but don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone that.
Everyone keep this. They won't watch the show.
They will watch the show.
So change it up, and the players will feel so good that they figure out your impenetrable mystery, that's just that can be drastic because you have to make sure that all the pieces fit together still in a way that is at least satisfying. And if the players sort of have no lingering questions, well, actually, if they do, that becomes a fun little next time. They're like, well, okay, this guy definitely did it.
But they may have done most of the work for you.
Yeah.
Of piecing together all of your clues into the completely wrong hypothesis, right?
Yeah.
Like, let them be right. But then, if there's a mystery, if there's still some weird little plot element that doesn't fit, you can spin that off.
That off. The another thing that you can do is to sort of this I also take from TV tropes and whatnot is that once the players have gotten a suspect who they believe is to be the culprit and they've pieced it all together, have that person confess.
Yes.
Just out loud. It's a thing that sort of everyone complains about on TV.
Yeah.
Because if they just didn't say anything, all the evidence you have is completely circumstantial. They clearly would have gotten off if they didn't admit to a crime. But again, you're dealing with a 45-minute TV show. You're dealing with a X number of hours game that needs to have a nice sort of bow, a satisfying conclusion for the players to be like, oh yes, we got it right, because he just suddenly went from being no, I didn't do it, to just laughing maniacally. Yes, I did it, and I'd kill him again if I had the chance.
You were a little bit too into that. I think you. No, speaking from experience. All this being said, I want to acknowledge that there are some games out there which we're describing a very narrative approach, where what matters most is that everybody works together at the table to create a fun story with a satisfactory climax that everyone is excited about and talks about on their drive home and the next day and goes onto Facebook or Twitter and raves about. Yeah. But that might not be your table. You might have mechanical-oriented simulationist players that will get really insulted or even offended if you adjust the plot to fit their theory. They want to win fair and square, or they don't want to win.
Yeah.
And there's a long tradition of this. It's called the fair play murder mystery. Ellery Queen, short stories and novels made it famous, but it's where it's a little bit more competitive or even antagonistic relationship between the players and the GM, which we don't normally encourage. but where the players are trying to figure out if they can beat that super smart puzzle that the GM has built. And the GM is trying to play the killer and the NPCs as smart as possible, appropriate to their, as smart as their characters actually are. And it's a bit of a duel of wits between the players and the GM. And if the players can solve the mystery, then they have earned this triumphant kind of victory. It's a different kind of fun.
Yeah.
We're back to session 0 again.
Yeah.
Make sure you know what you and your players are all on board with. And if you have one player at your table who's like, no, like I'm a fair play murder mystery person. Like I that's the kind of person I want to play. Then it's time for a conversation with everyone. How can we satisfy everybody?
Yeah.
Or can we not? Should we just not do murder mysteries because we have that's just not what our table is into.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, you as always, you know your group.
Yeah.
You should know your group.
Your mileage will vary.
Yeah. You should know them better than we do. We don't know who you are. This sort of gets back a little bit to something that Lava Bane was asking earlier about this session, this being repeatable. When I was writing this particular mystery, I did try to take a lot of that into account. That says, if the PCs don't find X here, they can find it here instead. So it does sort of give a little bit of a wiggle room as a GM where you can find things, and it ends up, as mysteries go, they're very open ended, kind of free form.
Yep.
You don't know where your players are going to go next. You don't know what they're going to check out next. All that being said, this is still a Starfinder adventure, and Lori Samba was saying, what if they get it right? And Dabbler Raccoon was right. You sort of reward them with a fight.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to throw some things, and you need to have XP to get to the next level, and it doesn't necessarily need to all be story-based award bonuses.
And you can also interrupt the investigation with an unrelated action encounter.
Yeah,
there's a lot of opportunities to do this, especially if you're like Death on the Niling it or you're Orient Expressing it, where the characters are traveling from one place to another. And there's destinations along the way, and there's things to do and things to see which are not related to the murder, but they give you opportunities for interesting locations and NPCs and interesting encounters and plots. We were talking before the stream about an example I did, and this is actually in the published adventure for my old Arthur Lives RPG, where there's a serial killer. And in the middle of the investigation of the serial killer, there's a copycat killer who starts copying the actual killer's pattern. And the PCs can sort of get sidetracked from their main investigation. They fight the copycat killer real quick. They figure out it's not the real killer. It's obvious it's not the real killer, but that gives them a little dungeon crawl XP fight scene, and then they get back to the actual main investigation after the copycat's been completed.
I mean, and whether or not if that's pre-written, you could also tweak it in such a way that, oh my god, they pick, the players pick a suspect, they go, they fight the guy, he's the, they think he's the killer, and then but you've still got another 2 hours left in the session, or something like that. Right? And they finally think, you throw in some extra evidence, and it turns out that this person was just a copycat or an accomplice, and the real killer's out there
and
doing something, or the mastermind.
Just like this plot can be expanded, it can also be contracted. If you had intended to have a 2 or 3 session game, but you suddenly realized you have to wrap it up in one, well, I guess he wasn't a copycat after all.
He was the main.
I guess he was the actual killer.
The main killer after all. Yeah, exactly. So let's talk a little bit about how to expand this a bit into I would say a conspiracy could be described as definitely a multi-adventure mystery, right?
Yes, and it's in many ways it takes all the challenges of a mystery and expands them over a campaign, so that your lack of combat, for example, which is sort of characteristic of an investigative mystery, extends through multiple adventures, and it might just be kind of generally a low action campaign, depending on what kind of a conspiracy you're running, of course. But you can alter that. You can add, because this is Starfinder, is an action adventure game. You can solve that problem by using conspiratorial groups and agencies which have a combat bent, right? Yeah. So it's the assassins and the Knights Templar and all kinds of people who have excuses for you to go fighting them. Yeah. Right. You can Assassin's Creed this thing up, right? And suddenly every conspiracy group has super well-trained killers with special psychic powers and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. And that will get you to part of where you need to go. Conspiracy stories, I think, can very broadly be separated into kind of two broad categories. One of which being the science fiction kind of alien conspiracy, the X-Files conspiracy, and the other being a kind of religious or supernatural conspiracy. The beauty of Starfinder is that you can put your two hands together, right? We can have both gray aliens on one hand, and you and Rob talked about a lot of that stuff last week. And you can also have Templars and Rosicrucians and all that stuff.
Cultists of Nyarlathotep.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. And you can put those things together, and they all fit in Starfinder. So it's really great that way. Because I am an academic, I come with a reading list. So I just want to encourage you to. The body of conspiracy literature is vast and wonderfully rewarding. It is weird as hell. You will find a lot of it very confusing. Did you guys talk about any of the classic UFO conspiracy books? Or
we talked a little. I mean, we went over a little bit with Whitley Strieber's Communion. We talked a little bit about the Hopkinsville incident.
Yes,
and one time just owls. We talked a little bit about Roswell.
And that actually showed up in
the Hill.
Was it 27 or 28? I forget which one of these I wrote.
27.
Because I grew up in Riverside, California. That's where I went to school. And there's a famous reptoid encounter in Riverside on the highway out from Riverside leading to Death Valley, where a guy was driving in his truck and he apparently thought that he drove over a reptoid, and it like bit into the bottom of his truck and bit off a piece of the car. And so those creatures became the Wetzels.
Oh yeah,
which we haven't seen yet, but because that guy who was driving the truck, his last name was Wetzel, so we know that.
Well, I'm going to interrupt with a question
also
from chat here about from Laurie 7x3 about bringing a PC into the loop secretly, apart from the other PCs. How do you feel about secret PC information? I mean, sometimes I like to do that personally. I like to do that for like, you've had a terrible nightmare. I'm going to take you into the other room and describe a nightmare to you, and then you tell the rest of the group whether or not you've had that nightmare and describe it or whatever. And maybe it has important divinatory aspects to it or what have you. That's fun. That can be fun. That can be you don't want to necessarily give someone a super critical piece of information just in case they mishear it or misspeak it.
So back in the old days when we were first starting out this we would do a lot of note passing, right? And we would write notes, and sometimes we would even write notes that just say this is a secret note, right? Just to make all the other players wonder what the hell you were doing. But now we have technology, so now you can text your secret notes, right? So when you want to deliver a secret note to a player, you can just click a button on your laptop and they get a text, and it can be like your gray alien masters are calling you or whatever. And you could deliver them that way. It depends on think about your audience participation. Do you want the audience to know about the texts? And make sure that you tell the players that you might be texting them, because otherwise they will be smart players and wise players. They will have their phones turned off and they will not get your text. So make sure that they're all aware.
Or just like, why the heck are you texting me?
I have found secret initiations for players to be a great way to reward those players who maybe are a bit more low key in the game session. They don't want the spotlight during the game. And remember, there's a lot of different kinds of role players, and some people are there because they like to be upfront and out loud, or they're there because they like to kill things and they've had a bad day at the office or whatever. But there are also players who get a lot of enjoyment at the session, but don't want to be called on or talk that much, right? And this can be a challenge for GMs because we want to draw them in, but that's not how they have fun.
Sure.
Right? So you can reward those players with additional meaning and additional content by giving them this sort of secret plot on the side, where they only have to interact with you. They don't have to draw the attention of the entire group. And they can write you an email, or they can text you about it, or they can just chat with you after the game, or you can give them a secret message or whatever. And it's a little bit low key, and everyone isn't looking at them.
Right.
And they also kind of get that little thrill of, hey, like the GM's giving me something special, and it's kind of cool, and it's just for me. So I find it a really useful tool for that in that regard.
Now, how would you go about, what kind of content would that be about? Say you were running a normal Starfinder campaign, and you want to just give someone a little. They've written in their backstory that they have some sort of organization in their past that may
Right.
not be the on the up and up that the rest
Yeah.
of the PCs would be happy to hear about or something.
So-
like that. Do you want to do you buy into that? Do you
Yeah,
try not to?
I normally buy into it, and I try to let the PC. But examine your players and think about how much you know about your player. Does your player trust you?
Yeah.
If the player trusts you a lot, then you can take that information that they have written and make it true from the player's perspective, but not necessarily objectively true. Like they think that group that they've been working for is a little shady, but it's actually owned by the Golden League or something,
Sure,
right?
yeah,
You can modify what the player has written, but you do that when the player already trusts you and kind of gives you some line. Think about is the player an active player? So if you give them a plot hook, are they going to follow it? Or are they mostly going to sit back and let you kind of give the plot to them, and they will just have that moment of recognition. It's like, oh, hey, that's a character from my background, right? And they'll get pleasure off of that. Like, hey, my background was useful. That was part of the game, but I didn't have to do anything to make that happen. Or you've got a more active case where you can send the player. Okay, like your old friend Audrey has sent you a note, and it's encoded. This is not a great example of a way to tune into your player's particular concerns. You can give them an encrypted message and let them decode it as a puzzle, which can be super fun to do. If they like that kind of thing, and don't make them do it during the game because it'll just distract them. But they can do it between sessions, right? Give them the puzzle,
or bring it to the group. I don't have this. I found this encoded message, and that'll let you know whether or not they wanted to keep it secret or not. They give them the opportunity to make it secret, keep it secret or not.
I have to put this plug in for Leo's amazing puzzle that he did for your Blades in the Dark game.
Oh yeah,
right. Like, okay, so I was working with Leo Glass, one of my fellow editors, and he made this like telescope thing with all kinds of
it was like a scroll case.
It was a scroll case.
Yeah.
And it was for the local in-house Blades in the Dark game, and you guys got to take it all apart, and it had clues layered onto clues, and it was multiple stages.
Pretty interesting. Yeah, and peeling off the faux leather.
Like if you have a GM who can make props, like you are one of the lucky few. Let me tell you.
It was pretty good. I think we can go back and.
So can I give some more tips?
Yeah, give some more tips.
So listen, if you're looking for conspiracy role-playing advice, I'm going to give you a book. And it's called Suppressed Transmissions. So this is by Ken Hite, who is one of the grand masters of conspiracy gaming. Ken Hite's old column, the Suppressed Transmissions column, used to run in Pyramid Magazine. Steve Jackson Games sort of built this early reputation on conspiracy gaming, and they literally wrote the game about it, the Illuminati game. But Ken had a regular column in that magazine, and those columns are all long out of print now. Some of them have been archived online. But eventually, a bunch of his columns were gathered together into 2 books and published under this Suppressed Transmission title by Steve Jackson. You can buy them on PDF. They're cheap. You can get them on all kinds of places. But I can't recommend these books enough because they're not just conspiracy theorying. They are theorizing for gamers. So he will take a conspiracy theory and he'll take 3 or 4 of them, three or 4 different weird events that have happened in history, and then he'll piece them together into a campaign. And it specifically does a lot of the work for you. It's just wonderful writing. And even though these books are like 20 years old, I have worn the hell out of them because I use so many adventures and gaming I have pulled from them. Now the reading lists get harder and harder to follow every time because Ken includes all of his sources in every article. And a lot of those sources are now long out of print and they get very hard to find as the years go by. But this just gives you an excuse to go to your local used bookstore, which is a treasure trove of amazing books. So yeah, I definitely recommend Ken Hite. And the holy grail, and I do not use those words lightly, the holy grail of occult conspiracy novels is Umberto Eco's Foucault's Pendulum. Now, this is not an easy book. If you look at it, this is like, it's not a weekend read, right? and this is tough. Like I have read a lot of books and I had to give this one 2 tries. It kicked my ass the first time. I got halfway through it and I had to stop. But I came back and it was worth it. And Eco's book is where we got that wonderful quote that you know it's a real conspiracy when somebody invokes the Templars. It's not a real conspiracy until the Templars show up. So those are a couple of books that I would start with. And And a lot of course, we live in a wonderfully online connected era. So a lot of crazy conspiracies like the Montauk chair and the Amber Room and all kinds of other great, and the UFO incidents that you mentioned, you can look these up now. They're so much more easier to do research now that everything is online and use those resources. And now, of course, we are all set in a Starfinder universe. We're in the Pact worlds. So you might have to file off all the serial numbers and translate them into,
Not always.
You're not always, and drop them into the Pact world setting. But there's wonderful backdoor ways into that too. Remember that we've already traveled to Earth in one Pathfinder adventure.
Two-ish, kind of.
Where and Rasputin is in it, for Christ's sake.
Yeah, that one, but...
You want an occult conspiracy character. Rasputin is like practically the John Dee of Russian conspiracy theories. So there's all kinds of ways you can pull that stuff in.
You're like, oh, now I can't remember the guy's name. You're like Miller over here. You're like Dennis Miller over here.
What do you mean?
You're just throwing references out. He's the reference of this other reference.
Well, okay, so John Dee was
the Queen Sorcerer.
Queen Elizabeth's astrologer and wizard. And John Dee, and I'm not making this up. This is once again, you got Tondra on the line, so I'm going to be like professor for 5 minutes. John Dee had this theory that he would map Queen Elizabeth and all the members of Queen Elizabeth's court to the royal court of King Arthur. So Elizabeth was Arthur, and Dee himself was Merlin, and all the other members of the court were members of Queen Elizabeth's court. Not literally, but like in an allegorical sense. And by doing this, he would capture the magic of King Arthur and use it to make Queen Elizabeth empire of the world. and this is why he referred to the New World as the New Atlantis, New Avalon. He called it the New Avalon because and so all of that occult conspiracy stuff about how I'm going to become the new King Arthur and take over the world. That I didn't make that up. Like that's straight from John Dee. Like this is
someone else made that up.
He wrote books about this. Anyway, it's great stuff.
For me, book-wise,
good.
Cryptonomicon by Neil Stephenson is kind of a good.
I know that one. Yes,
a lot of cryptography in it, obviously. And on the less serious side, I think Robert Anton Wilson's Illuminatus trilogy,
which is it's a touchstone. It's hard to read. I confess.
I read it when I was in high school, and it was bonkers then. And obviously, if I tried to read it now, I probably wouldn't be able to. So, not that I understood half of it.
Pretty much anything Philip Dick ever wrote. He wrote wonderful conspiracy novels, and Philip Dick mostly from all of his stories, short stories and novels that have been made into really terrible movies, most of which he never saw a penny of. He was largely ignored by American book critics while he was alive. He was huge, and he was like he was the Hitchcock of novel writing. He was popular in France. Europe loved Philip Dick, but here in America, he had a really hard time getting traction. But then after he died, people made movies out of all of his short stories, and they've become and many of the crazier weirdness conspiracy films out there have their roots in Philip Dick stories.
Awesome. If you had out there on chat, if you had a question that we didn't get to because the chat kind of scrolled up, popping it back in there right now. We'll try to get some Q&A as we chat a little bit about some of other things. We were sort of talking about like what's our favorite conspiracy. I didn't have a real answer to that.
Right.
But I do like the Roanoke disappearance.
It's fascinating
because who knows? That one has never been.
So a call out to my good old friend Jim Seals, who probably is not listening to this, but he's a scholar of Roanoke, and he's done a bunch of reading and writing about it. Roanoke is also home to one of the first, like there was a girl that was born at the Roanoke colony, and she's the first European from that era born in America, right? And no one knows who she is or where she is, and like she disappeared with all the rest of the colony. Like that is a PC origin story if I ever heard it, right? Like play that character.
Awesome, yeah. Even like Stephen King kind of dips into it with.
We've got
some
the
of his
carving
stuff.
on the mysterious carving on the tree.
Yeah.
Like like did they all get eaten by monsters? What happened? Right?
Yeah, and then Peyton was had happened to mention the SCP website, the SCP Foundation
Right.
website, which has just got lots of different. That's just a wiki that gets filled with weird nonsense. That is very fun to read and could be also just so you can grab them as inspiration for your game.
The Montauk chair, which I mentioned earlier, is this conspiracy that argues that the Navy developed time travel technology in the 1940s, which was built into a chair, a physical chair, which could travel through time and to different and parallel worlds.
Mhm.
You can read about this or see it a little bit in the Philadelphia experiment.
Yeah.
The Amber Room, which we also mentioned, the Amber Room was literally a room in which all the walls, ceiling, and floor were made of amber. It was constructed in the 1700s for a Russian prince. It was lost during World War II because the Nazis stole it. I'm not even making this up.
Stole a room.
They stole the entire room because it was apparently panels.
Mhm.
And you would assemble the panels to create the room.
Oh,
So
okay.
you could disassemble the room,
okay.
and you could pack it up,
Yeah.
right, and put it on a truck. What truck? You know, that you could get all Indiana Jones with it. So yeah, and then the Amber Room, presumably, if you could build that room, it would concentrate and focus magical power, right? That's why would you build it out of amber? And it would be a place that. So if you've got a mystic bad guy or a witch warper bad guy, they want to find the Amber Rooms. They can construct it because they had this powerful ritual that can only be cast from within the Amber Room.
Do something,
and you know then you're good. Then you're off to the races.
There are there was another earlier question I want to go back to a little bit from Cosmic Crit. Hi, Patrick. Is talking about like, are we going to learn anything in the future about some of our Starfinder's greatest mysteries?
Right, like the Gap.
The Gap, where's Galarian, et cetera, et cetera. Those two questions. Rovagug was in Galarian, so
yes.
Where is he now?
Yeah, okay.
Right, exactly.
Oh no, the other the dwarf god that's missing.
Yes, Torag.
Torag
has gone is possibly missing. So you know we're not going to answer those questions. At the moment.
Answer is not today.
But I do want, and I think Patrick's third part was like, "What's the deal with Skittermanders?"
Yes.
Obviously, you all know the deal with Skittermanders. There is I do want everyone to sort of keep an eye out though for we will answer mysteries every once in a while.
Yeah.
Right. We talked a little bit about. I mean, this here we sort of. There's some things mentioned in Pact Worlds that sort of get picked up in Threefold Conspiracy, sort of answering who destroyed this science platform and that sort of thing. But then only sort of very briefly talked about, sort of seen the product page after Threefold Conspiracy is the 3-part high-level devastation arc.
Oh, yes. Oh, that's right.
And that's going to answer some questions for sure. That's going to give you a bunch of information from the past. It's going to actually give you, and I'm just going to, because it happens in the first volume, it's not that much of a spoiler. We're going to learn a little bit more about the Bantrids' mysterious history. Because they woke up out of there and they have amnesia. They don't know who they are.
For those of you that don't remember what Bantrids are, they are this alien race that rolls around on a giant rollerball instead of feet.
Mm-hmm.
They are
kind
crazy.
Of like little cones. And yeah, they were funny. They were happened to be a creation of mine for Pack Worlds. And Rob McCurry likes them a lot too.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about like, well, this devastation arc, should we answer any questions? We both were like, let's talk about Bantrids. I'm like, oh, great, because we were the only ones working on that outline at the time. So we got really circled the drain a little bit there with that. But we're gonna see some other mysteries answered from the distant past of Starfinder. So keep an eye out for that. Hopefully we'll hear some more information about that as it keeps coming up.
Yeah, and you know, I hang out on like the Starfinder Facebook group and stuff like that, and often I'll see notes from fans or from players, I should say, who will say, yeah, like in my campaign the gap is X, like it was caused by this thing. Like that's perfect.
Yeah, you
do
can
that.
totally do that.
If we don't answer a question, it's on purpose. Like we're leaving it unanswered so that you can make the answer whatever best fits the story you want to tell. And you're not doing anything wrong. Like I encourage every group to do that. Solve these mysteries for yourselves and make up cool answers. And you know, we might steal it.
No, we never steal.
No, we would never do that.
Never steal.
We would never do that.
Homage. This sort of also gets to the question that Lori just asked.
Lori, send me the Discord link and then I'll find it and I will join your Discord.
Yeah. How much of Starfinder's lore is actually conspiracies? That's again, you can answer that in your own home campaign. Is to 0 to 100%
Yes.
as much as you like.
But you have a lot of Starfinder developers, a lot of members of the Star Chamber are very interested in this conspiracies topic.
Mhm.
And so we do tend to work it in to the setting.
Yeah, we
just
will
because we love it and we're excited
throw
by it.
some shady operators here and there.
Yeah.
So I don't think at the moment most of what we say in a book is true, right?
Yes.
If we tell you that this happened, but we don't explain it, but it still happened, right?
Right.
We talk about the I'm just going to pull an example from random from nowhere. The Lao Aire hospice that's off of Brethida, where these terminally ill Barathus go with a
Is that really a random reference out of
no,
nowhere?
sure. It's I only just might happen to be copy fitting an adventure that takes place there, but it's home to these terminally ill Barathus who have
Yes.
some fungus, some fungal disease, but
They have athlete's tentacle.
they have athlete's tentacle, the worst kind, that is true. That hospice exists in our
Yes.
setting, and what we have said there so far is true. But we don't explain where that sort of infection came from and why it's so virulent and what's being done to cure
Right.
it. That sort of allows us and you at home to sort of feed into a thing. So we don't necessarily, with the exception of some of the articles that end up coming in the Threefold
I was
Conspiracy,
going to talk about that.
are written from a conspirators, or I guess you'd say conspiracy theorists' point of view. So
Yeah,
they're very interesting.
There's 3 of these articles. There's written on each element of the threefold conspiracy.
Of the unseen that we talked about last week.
Right.
basically.
And they're each written by a different conspiracist.
Conspiracist. There you go. That's a word.
And so they're completely in-world documents. And what that means is that they might be right, they might be wrong. Some of those things tie into the plot, some of it doesn't. And you can and some of it is just intended to be plot hooks. Remember, a lot of the things that we, when we talk about things specifically and we use an outside sort of narrator's omniscient third-person point, those things are all true. But while we're doing that, we might leave a detail fuzzy or uncertain.
Mm-hmm.
And often we're doing that as a sort of opener for a later writer to come along and take that plot and make an adventure or a scenario, Starfinder society scenario out of it, or tie it into another book that comes out. They're kind of like uncompleted passes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you choose to complete that pass, you want to accept that and then run with that plot detail. That's great. But if no one ever does, then it's just left for players to do that.
Yeah, to use even in backstory.
That's right.
Or
That's
to
right.
just sort of use as in your home campaign. And generally, oftentimes I like to ask more questions than we answer.
Yes.
An adventure might answer some questions pretty definitively, but somewhere in the back matter of that adventure, we'll throw in some more questions.
Yeah.
Or we'll definitely have a setting book that comes out around that same time that just sort of gives those plot hooks, like Near Space, right? It's going to have tons of other plot hooks in there. We're going to hear about some history of the Veskarium and Skittermanders for all you Skittermander fans out there. And then, here's more of them. Then we can go there and do that.
And sometimes this can pose it can actually be a challenge to our own adventure path, because we'll put all these plot hooks and interesting elements in an adventure, and the players love them and want to explore them, but that's not on the adventure path.
Yeah.
And so the players and the GM have to decide, okay, well, what are we actually going to do next week? Are we going to follow the adventure, or are we going to go sandboxing and go follow this other path? Can we come back to the adventure later? Mm-hmm. And you totally can.
Yeah.
You go where your players want to go and have fun with it.
This actually reminds me of the thing that we did way earlier on in the first volume of Aeon Throne.
Yep.
Ron wrote a gazetteer. Ron Landine wrote a gazette. He wrote the adventure and he wrote a gazetteer of the surrounding area, and he threw in basically what was essentially a Roanoke mystery.
Oh yeah.
This is the settlement of Dalesko, which has just everyone disappeared, no one knows where they went, and here's a weird flower.
Very good.
Then that's sort of there, and another a shout out to Cosmic Crit, who decided to take that and have a side adventure there, and just because it was so interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
I was writing to them. I was like, I didn't mean it to be so interesting. Sorry, it just the way it is.
You did it right.
Yeah,
you did it right.
Yeah. So we're just about out of time. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you so much.
And chatting with us and listening to us chat to each other. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, everyone is inviting me to their Discord. So send me the link to jason.tondo@paizo.com, and I will follow that link. And I can't guarantee how active I'll be, but I will listen.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'm on a couple Starfinder Discords where I'm just sort of I lurk
Yeah, we lurk.
silently in the background.
Yes, you look silently in the background.
Just for me, I would just like to plug the fact that my piece of fiction that I wrote just came out on the Paizo blog just like an hour or two ago.
It's the Kasatha story.
Yeah, the story about the set on the Adari. Please read it. It's fun. I liked it. You know, hey, this stuff. You know, come check. Also, get my adventure. But
the whole Kasatha lore is one of the things I love the most about it. I loved it before I came to work here. When I first started to read Starfinder, the first character I wanted to make was a Kasatha Solarian, and I still want to play that character.
So, well, you still might be able to. You never know. So yeah, and be sure to check us out next week. I'll be back, and it might be with Jake here, or it might be with somebody else.
I am the B team next week.
Yes,
we might have Ron Lundeen in here to talk about his adventure for this one.
That final volume, which it was a show that got postponed from a couple weeks ago, but we're going to get him to talk about it.
We might be able to get you some developer behind the screen tips on that adventure.
Definitely a good site. And Peyton, do we have anybody coming up afterwards, BB Wolf?
I don't know if she canceled or not, but we're about to find out.
All right, let's find out together. And if she canceled, it's clearly a conspiracy.
Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Dun, dun, dun. Goodbye.